Howdy, my name is Nonat, and after years of talking about it, saying I'll do it, putting delays and scheduling issues, I finally did the deed. Me and my group finally got around to playing a one-shot of Starfinder. Well, how was it? It was pretty fun, but let me give you the play-by-play of my experience. So all of us in this group are pretty well experienced in tabletop RPGs. We've all played at least 3 or 4 different systems. All of us have experienced Pathfinder 1 or D&D 3.5 in some manner or aspect, so we were all able to pick up on the basics pretty fast. My 3 players had no issues making characters, and I, as a GM who has never played Starfinder, just kind of trusted them. I didn't have time to look into all of the rules, I didn't scan the core rulebook or anything. I just studied the one-shot, and luckily, the one-shot made things really easy for a first-time GM, telling me exactly what roles needed to happen, the DC for those roles, and as someone who isn't super fluent with the system, the one-shot was incredibly well made. Also, because I'm me, and I like changing things, I rewrote half the one-shot, not really changing many of the required roles, but especially changing the ending in the final encounter, which I'll get to in a little bit. The party consisted of a Vesk soldier spec'd mostly into sniper rifles, a Skittermander Solarian, which I had never heard of before, and a Ysoki mechanic, who ended up being the complete MVP for most of the roleplay session. For anyone who's worried about it, we did play through the Great Grav Train heist, so there might be minor spoilers, but I'm not going to reveal any big major twists of the one-shot, so if you think you're going to play it one day, don't worry, I won't be spoiling anything major, and the entire ending has been rewritten by yours truly. So it starts pretty typical. Like most tabletop systems, the beginning is roleplay. You're not rolling many dice, and you're just kind of interacting as characters. But there was already a difference from the first 5 minutes of gameplay, and I think it was mostly for me, but I hope my players realized it as well. The descriptions are so different, and that is so shockingly refreshing as a GM. I don't have to say, you roll up in a horse-drawn carriage or at the tavern drinking mead for the 50,000th time in my life. I get to say, you hear the hum of the grav train below you skating across the desert as you descend above it on your entercopter. You all have, parachute backpacks strapped to your backs, ready to leap from the entercopter and descend onto the baggage cart. Like, oh my god, I get to use all new flavorful words, colorful descriptions, and things I just don't get to talk about in a Euro fantasy setting like D&D or Pathfinder. It's something I didn't know that I needed, and even just changing the setting this much already had me and my players super excited. The first actual dice roll they get to do is the mechanic who has to roll engineering or computers to unlock a locked maglock. And boy, did I not realize how easy it is to min-max in Starfinder. This is a level 6 one-shot. Great Grav Train is designed for 4 level 6 characters. I had 3 level 6 characters, but I didn't change the DCs on any of the dice rolls. That maglock had a DC 19 to unlock it, and our mechanic had a plus 17 to their dice. This means the mechanic only fails on a natural 1 for this lock, and of course doesn't roll the 1, and I am instantly brought back to my days, in current days, playing 3.5 and even Pathfinder 1st Edition, where you can min-max your bonuses so freaking high. It honestly makes me double back to the beginning of Pathfinder 2E, where people are, even to this day, kind of complaining, why are the numbers so big? The numbers are way too big in Pathfinder 2E. Well, this level 6 has a plus 17 to 2 of their skills. I know they're a mechanic, but if I can remember the number of different sources of bonuses for that mechanic is like plus 2 from their class, plus 3 for being a class skill, plus 6 from their ranks, plus something else. It's wild. It's all these different bonuses all adding together for a plus 17 to a skill at level 6. I think the highest you could get to at level 6 in PF2 would be I think plus 14 unless you have something giving you like a status bonus, because you've got 6 from your level, 4 from expert, 4 from your ability scores, 14. So unless someone is actually actively giving you a circumstance or status bonus, you are maxing out at plus 14, not plus 17. Not that much bigger. It's just funny that people complain about PF2 having big numbers when every system kind of has these ludicrous rolls. So any locks throughout the entirety of this one-shot were no problem for this mechanic. Pretty much zero margin of error. And the soldier sure was good at shooting people. Pretty much very similar. I think he had like a plus 14 to hit against these targets who have like sub 20 armor class. Honestly, I was sad we didn't have the plus 10, minus 10 crit rules of PF2 because he was regularly breaking armor class by over 10. And he had a blast doing it. When you get to just take off 2 heads in one round, oh, it's just a great feeling as a GM to watch him do it. And according to his tweet, it was also fun to do it. And finally, the Skittermander. If you're not aware of Skittermanders, they're freaking adorable, and you should love them, and I want them to come to Pathfinder. I don't know how, but I kind of do. But at the same time, they'd be less special if they were in every system, so maybe just keep them to Starfinder, because that's where they belong. So Skittermander's cute. The races never really came into play that much, but what did come into play a lot was his class that I had never heard of before in my life. The Solarian. The Solarian is a tiny sun. His class revolves around utilizing a small sun that orbits him, and you take different solar revelations, which are special abilities. One of his big things was he had a solar revelation, I think, that gave him bonuses to grapple. He also had these, like, hot oven mitt grippers that could also give a bonus to grapple, and his sun did 3 fire damage at the start of anyone's turn if they were next to him. So all this little guy would do would be to skitter up to someone and give him a big ol' 6-armed hug and grapple them, and then just deal damage per round on top of them, restricting them from moving. And I don't know if you've played Starfinder, but it's really hard to both succeed and escape a grapple. The DC is ridiculous, as it is their armor class plus 8, and your grapple check is just an attack roll. Now, there are feats that give you bonuses to your grapple check, which of course he had, but the enemies don't tend to have bonuses to escape checks. So his escape DC, the enemy's escape DC, was like a 32, and they had like a plus 5 to escape. So this guy just latched on, this Skittermander would just latch on to people and never let go. It was fantastic. They demolished their way through the first encounter, taking absolutely no damage. The Skittermander just mercy guns this guy with a critical hit of non-lethal damage, knocking him out and hiding the body. They make their way through like a social encounter, which was really, really cool. The one-shot laid it out very well, gave the players a bunch of different actions they can opt to take, and through some very, very clever and well-strategized choices on the players' parts, they actually aced it pretty much perfectly. It's similar to a PF2 victory point system, except there's also competing victory points that are trying to challenge yours, and it was first to X number. And by the time the players got to X number, the rival team was at 1. They move on to the third cart, and they find an artifact. They succeed more ridiculously easy computer and engineering checks, and a rival outlaw gang shows up, and I don't really know why the one-shot is written this way, but I used it. All of the outlaws that show up to rival you, which granted there are 6 of them, but they're all level 2 creatures with very low bonuses and very low hit points, which made it really fun for the party to blitz these guys. But the most important thing about this encounter is that it went 3 rounds specifically. This was what our Solarian was waiting for. You know, the mechanic blasted them with fire and ice pistols, the soldier blew some head-offs with his sniper rifle, but the Solarian was just sitting there, tanking hits and waiting for turn 3 to show up. And when it finally did, Solarians have a very special ability called Supernova, which is a fireball. For 1d6 damage plus 1d6 damage per level. So he just supernova'd for 7d6 damage on an enemy who had 4 hit points. It was totally unnecessary, but it was funny as hell. And this led us to the climax of this one-shot, where they did need to get out of this train with the artifact in tow, but they had been discovered by one of the outlaws having a radio calling for backup and alerting the train to their attempted coup. So they climb up out of the cart, and this is where I changed the one-shot a lot, so you probably won't ever experience it this exact way. Lying on top of this cart was a specific payload dropped by their contact in their entercopter. Because of the backup coming, the entercopter wasn't safe there to it wasn't safe for it to fly down and pick them up. They would have to hold out for 1 full minute as their contact assembled the evacuation coordinates procedure for their super, what is it called? A troop mech? I think troop tank. A gargantuan troop tank, which the 3 of them got to man, each of them taking a different weapon. The soldier took the Gatling gun, the Solarian took the sonic shotgun, and the mechanic took the missile barrage as they fought through multiple waves of snipers in heavily armored vehicles driving alongside the train, as well as enemy, I think they're called guardian robots. They're not technically mechs, but they are large enough that sprinted up and climbed onto the train that they had to fight off with the mech's scythe and buzzsaw. And of course, 3 rounds into the encounter, they're surrounded by guardian robots. So what does the Solarian do? The Solarian jumps out of their cockpit, leaps off the mech, and supernovas 3 of these freaking mechs. It was either 2 or 3 of them for a bunch of damage, which had already been slightly whittled away, and of course drops them to 0, which was freaking awesome. And again, this entire time as a GM, I'm getting to describe such unique occurrences that I never get to describe in fantasy games. I get to describe a mech falling off of a grav train in the middle of a desert going 100 miles per hour, that as the mech hits the ground, it suffers from the instant friction, spinning it, kind of pulling half of it under the grav train as the rest of it just flies by the wayside and out of sight within seconds. As a GM, it's just so fun to be able to describe these brand new situations that I've never gotten to do before. If you've never played a tabletop RPG in a different setting, doesn't even have to be a different system. If you've always played 5e as your standard Eurocentric system, try playing it in like an Eastern-inspired fantasy, or even like a Western American fantasy could be interesting. Do yourself a favor and try that, because as a GM, it's both fun, refreshing, and it makes you better at improv, because thinking of things in a different situation will give you inspiration to describe things in other situations. It is a blast, and I cannot recommend it enough. Long story short, my players decimated the oncoming hordes, and as soon as they were surrounded by a bunch of things that they had no chance of standing up against, of course, the mech's evacuation procedure goes off. They launch up into the atmosphere and meet back up with their contact, where they decide whether to keep the artifact for themselves or sell it for money. And because my players are both greedy and have good common sense, they decide to sell it and get rid of it for good so that they can all live comfortably. Starfinder is so cool. Like, this one shot was so fun. I'm going to play another one with some of my other groups. I'm going to force them to play Starfinder. I will warn you, it's a lot. Especially as a GM, there's a lot to keep track of. We did mech combat completely wrong, but we did it the way that felt good to us. We simplified it. Everyone got a weapon. Everyone took turns shooting their appropriate weapon in the mech. There's pages upon pages of specific mech combat and specific things here or there, like critical effects and whatnot. But we just played it with our knowledge of tabletop RPGs and looking up rules occasionally, and it was a blast. It never came to a sudden halt because we had to look something up. It kept going. And I will 100% be playing Starfinder again. I would actually love to get an in-person Starfinder game at Gen Con, so maybe that'll happen. That'd be a super big blast. But yeah, that's all I got to say. If you haven't played it and you're considering it, go for it. Take that plunge. Buy one of the one-shots. They're $5 on Paizo's website. This is not sponsored. This is me just saying, it can't hurt. It's $5, and the rest of the Starfinder rules are free on Nethys, except for some of the newer stuff like Mech Combat, which is not on Nethys, which is why we kind of had to make it up. But highly recommend it. You will not be disappointed. I'm almost out of memory on my phone camera, so I do have to wrap this up. So shout out to my patrons for keeping this channel afloat and helping me do what I do. Shout out to all of you for recommending me to play Starfinder. If you follow me on Twitter and you were one of these like 250 people who liked my post and interacted with the Starfinder post, you are part of the reason I tried it. So thank you specifically. If you don't already follow me on Twitter, what are you doing? No, seriously, thank you for all the support. I've been having a lot of fun over on Twitter, making some posts, engaging with the community. Always a fun time. So thank you so very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, no nat ones.